How we doing? That good.
Wow,
Okay.
love that enthusiasm.
Be that
Keep
kind
it
of session.
coming.
Are we on? Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for attending. I think you have photos there, so you know who everybody is on stage. I always like to start a conversation like this with trying to set some frameworks for us to think through. So when Lee was on stage, he mentioned 2009 was the beginning of Bitcoin. It's 2024.
Yes, it is.
So I'm going to use about 15 years as a crypto time unit, so a CTU, if that makes sense. So I want to start with Shiseido. Shiseido started 1872.
1872, 151 years old.
It took about one crypto time unit for Shiseido to come out with the Fukuhara sanitary toothpaste, which was the first mainstream toothpaste in Japan. And I believe the first real product.
Yeah, and I actually worked on that launch. Very few people know that.
Right. Dina's social game was fantastic for that. Carrie, Mattel, 1945 is when Mattel started.
Indeed.
It took about a crypto time unit to get to a small product we know called Barbie, right? So
Who celebrated her birthday just a couple of days ago.
happy
65.
birthday.
Happy
We
birthday,
can sing
Bee.
later, yes. Jamie, 1998, PayPal, I believe it began. So I figure it took about a crypto time unit for us to get our current day Elon. Right?
Awesome.
Just like an evolution. And I only say that because those things all take a while to get to where we're at. And we've heard some amazing conversations today. I'm here to tell you I think we're still a long way away from where we need to be. And I think the three amazing women we have here all work at brands that understand what it means to have millions of customers and to build things that take a really long time to build and to understand the sort of idea of you can bring a new generation to a new technology or a new idea, but it's not something that's going to happen overnight. And I think sometimes we fool ourselves a little bit that Web3 is inevitable. I don't think it is. I think we also fool ourselves sometimes to think that we are micro-changing the world when in fact sometimes it takes a really long time for the big changes to happen. But I do think the fact that these three brands and women building on those are committing to the idea of emerging technology as a new way to market, to know customers, to build financial rails, to build connection, and also to build product on top of is really what we're here to discuss. So, and I'm excited to have that conversation, by the way. But I just sometimes think we should not look at Web3 and especially crypto Web3 as being inevitable. I think we really have to be cautious about that because I think we get in our own way. And I kind of want to ask you guys about this. Yep. So my first thought is, in 30 seconds each, Dina, I'm going to start with you. How are you defining Web3 these days? Is it specific to blockchain? Is it an expansive definition of emerging tech? How do you talk to your teams about that?
Great question. I think it is really important to level set. I do use personally a pretty generous and expansive definition of Web3. I will push back a little bit on you, Sam, because I actually do feel that there is a degree of inevitability to Web3. However, I do not think that we yet understand precisely what that will look like. I think that it will be built on some of the tenets that so many of us in the room feel really passionately about, like potentially a degree of decentralization, certainly a degree of ownership and co-creation. So when I am, for example, educating senior leadership within our organization, that is the definition that I lean on when I'm talking about Web3.
Carrie?
So much of what we're doing in this space is around virtual collectibles and trying to understand what that means to people. One of the most successful things at a time when NFTs aren't doing so well, Hot Wheels has really seen some success here. And part of that is a community of collectors who are already very tech-friendly, i.e. often men, and a group of collectors who love Hot Wheels being very comfortable in this space. And on top of that, loving that there's a physical product at the end, and that seems to be a real engagement, and trying to unlock that for other broader, to your point, this is about going mass, right, to really engage people in something that matters to them. We're still doing that work and still trying to unlock it.
Amazing. Jamie?
Yeah, and PayPal obviously looks at it from a fairly specific point of view. And so we define it as the opportunities that blockchain, the underlying technology, will enable, particularly in payments, but also we're excited about things like digital identity. And in blockchain specific for payments, we're excited because it's truly the first innovation of payment rails in about 50 years. So imagine that, you know, our parents' generation saw the evolution of credit cards and the SWIFT network. And since we've had the ATM, and that is it. So, which is a leap forward in terms of experience, but
Works well.
It does work well. But same technology, and so we're really excited about what blockchain will bring and bringing that to a more accessible place for everyone.
I want to think about, and I want your guys' opinion, again, almost everyone who was on stage before us is very innovation forward and building incredible things, right? And we're going to see how those go. I've truly come to the place where any mainstream brand that does not have innovation as part of its core marketing DNA is going to lose. So what is it like to be able to have to represent innovation as a core channel of how you're communicating to your audiences? Let's start, Jamie, with you.
Yeah, so for us, it's been an evolution in education. Myself, like involving myself in the new technologies and coming up to speed, then bringing that internal and trying to basically make the case internally of the new channels where we should be, and doing that in a brand that isn't necessarily embracing you know, all of the new technologies and the new channels and the new marketing innovations. So it's been a journey, but what has been great is as an innovative BU within this larger brand, we've been able to kind of push the envelope internally and do a lot of cool things. Being here and being a sponsor at this event being a great example.
Carrie, what do you think about the idea of innovation as a key way that you evolve your relationship with customers?
Well, Mattel is truly founded, like, it's about innovation. The Barbie brand really came from Ruth Handler, our founder, one of our founders, watching her daughter play with paper dolls at a time when only baby dolls, like, she didn't want to play with baby dolls. She wanted to imagine a future. And that led to the creation of Barbie. Now, there's a whole long story. There's actually a movie about it. You might have heard. Similar story, actually, with Hot Wheels. So it's not just second nature. Innovation is first nature, I think, at Mattel. And I've been lucky enough. I've been there for 20 freaking years. And from the get-go, I've always been involved in some sort of innovation. Like from the time that like apps came along. There was a time that apps didn't exist, the phone didn't exist, and then they did, and we tried to figure out, all right, well, how do you do this? And as technology has advanced, I mean, now there's this thing called AI, apparently, that we should be thinking about, and, you know, Web3, that it's going into the dark, it's going into the uncertainty, but there's support for let's just keep pushing and keep finding what else you can find in the world. How can you engage people? Even in the sense, by the way, so the group I'm in is called Future Lab, some of whom are here today. And what we're now looking at is, so Mattel does dolls, vehicles, games. We do that really, really well. And then there are things that are outside of that nobody knows how to deal with. So what does the metaverse look like? What is Web3? What are those things going to mean to people? And how can we use them to help engage people in a better way? Not just children, but now we're looking at adults. In fact, the fastest growing market in toys is what they call the kidult. An adult person who wants to re-engage with their childhood in some way. So there's real opportunity in just like thinking unconventionally now.
Dina?
I would say similarly to Mattel, innovation really is at the root of the Shiseido brand and organization. I'll just give you two quick examples to contextualize, how innovation is central to the brand and to the group. So I think first and foremost, few people know this, but Shiseido actually innovated the modern beauty consultant in the early 1900s. And then similarly, we also have a publication in Japan called Hanatsubaki, which is celebrating its 100th anniversary this year. It's a stunning, highly editorial print magazine. So being really at the very forefront of content marketing before anyone was talking about content marketing. For me, I'm super passionate as an individual about innovation, but I am not an advocate of innovation for the sake of innovation. I actually feel quite strongly that innovation really needs to ladder back up to both our group objectives as well as our brand's objectives. Obviously we don't have a ton of time together today, but I will just say a good example of that was the generative art project that we did for brand Shiseido in collaboration with Art Blocks Engine. So some of you may have seen this project, hopefully, in the press, or if you were at Miami Art Week, Miami Art Basel in December. But we partnered with, a small collective of generative artists to create works that were inspired by essentially the DNA of brand Shiseido, as well as the, unique sort of components that connect back to one of our core franchises, Future Solutions. And that was a super interesting release, and I think one of the reasons that it was received so well, both within the Web3 community, but also within the Web2 community and internally, is because it was very easy for people to see the connectivity between generative art as a practice, a discipline, and a medium, and the innovation that is sort of core to beauty. So that was a really interesting project to work on, a project that we're really proud of, and looking forward to some other moments that we'll build on that in the coming months and years.
One of the discussions I have a lot is about what defines the creator economy, and is that core Web3. So Roblox last year paid out $750 million to creators. There was $50 billion of digital assets purchased in game. But a lot of people say, okay, yes, but that is going to Roblox, that's going to Fortnite, that's going to Steam, whatever it may be. Dina, I know you guys have built a fair bit in digital worlds. Carrie, I assume Mattel has done similar. Do you look at that as outside of Web3, or do you look at that is part of the Web3 ecosystem, is the fact that we are able to reward people, even if it's not at the percentages we may like for creators to get, but is it still core Web3 to look at those as creator-led opportunities?
I think for me, that sort of fits more into the evolution of the digital experience, commerce, and social media. So if you talk, for example, to the folks at Roblox, and I don't know if anyone from their team happens to be in the room today, but they really do envision the platform as the next gen of social, a platform that is more immersive, real-time, and participatory. And I think that outside of sort of very, small subsets of people who are working in these spaces, the economy of Roblox is often underestimated. So I'll give the very obvious example of a creator like Builder Boy, Sam Jordan, who literally, I think this data is around 2 years old, but he sold $10 million, 10 million American dollars, not Robux, of virtual goods on Roblox. Now, one of the challenges, though, and this is where I think Web3 presents some advantages, hopefully, is that the economics are still not very favorable in a lot of those ecosystems for brands or for creators, and that applies to other spaces like Fortnite as well. So I think it will be very interesting to see how those spaces are forced to evolve, either from pressure from their inherent, community of creators and brands, or perhaps from evolutions that might take place within Web3 that kind of put that pressure on more implicitly. So we'll see.
I think, too, that the piece that still needs to start working is the interoperability from the user point of view. So we think it's always like, what does the person need? Like, how are we solving a problem for them? And so a lot of what Web3 is delivering right now is cool, but it doesn't necessarily deliver on the promise of where it wants to go. And I actually think that until interoperability there's a solution for that, so what I'm doing in Roblox now has meaning somewhere else, that we're not gonna see that that tipping point.
That's gonna be very difficult, though, because the reality is that each of these platforms has their own respective identity. And we represent ourselves differently within those platforms.
Fair.
And so I think that actually the promise of interoperability is a little unrealistic, certainly in this moment, and maybe even in the longer term.
That's what AI will fix. All right, moving on. Jamie, I think a lot about a brand like PayPal coming in, where the narrative around crypto was, this is where people buy drugs, where they order murders. It's like, it's not been very good. And
I
then,
hope my comms team is not listening right now.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
I'm not saying you guys are doing that, by the way. But then we look to the last 3 months, and now people are putting crypto in retirement accounts.
Yep.
And to me, that is such a significant shift that we have seen happen slower than we thought, but then very fast. And I'm wondering, does that ease your opportunity to talk to your team and how it's seen inside to say, you know, if you know, the person can add it to a 401k, maybe this legitimizes it to a point where we need to think about how we're evolving money. What's that conversation like?
Yeah, so as I was saying, so I am lucky enough to be a founding member of PayPal's blockchain, crypto, and digital currency group. We have been working on the opportunity since 2019. Not a lot of people realize that. And the goal was always our new stablecoin, or I guess it's not that new anymore, our 6-month-old stablecoin, PayPal USD. And that was always the goal, was to get to that because, as I said before, that's where we see the evolution of payment rails, more inclusive, less costs, et cetera. Between that time period, we've seen massive highs. We've seen a very long crypto winter. We've seen some not great events going on in the industry, which has damaged some trust. But at the same time, we're in this amazing cycle right now where you're seeing not only an upswing in crypto itself, but also just a lot of excitement around kind of like the mainstreaming. And to your point, it's been a conversation internally, and we've always had great support from our senior leaders. Dan Schulman was our previous CEO, and now we have a new CEO, Alex. And he also is a huge supporter. And it is still an education as we bring people that are not as exposed, and they're very interested, surprised to hear that people are doing things like 401k investments in crypto. But I personally really believe in the promise, and I think it would be an absolute shame for this not to be more mainstream. And that is the role that PayPal is really trying to play, is to bring something that might be niche and try to bring it more to a mass audience. You know, we have over 400 million users, but being on chain, you know, you're now outside of the walled garden of PayPal. 400 million users is small potatoes to what this could be. So, yeah, it's a balancing act of, you know, trying to build that support internally, trying to build that education internally, but also just powering ahead at the same time.
I love that. I was interviewing Ben Leventhal from Blackbird, who was mentioned earlier, on the Gen Z podcast every week, dropping on Mondays. And Ben seemed to be very opinionated about that we have to stop talking about crypto and we have to start talking more about consumer tech. So when I think of Mattel, Carrie, and the amazing work you guys have done with Hot Wheels, where you're selling millions of dollars worth of digital collectibles, how much of that is just because you're giving a new way for a Hot Wheels collector to put something in their digital garage? Or how much of that do you think has to be discussed about a wallet or about the interoperability, as you mentioned, regarding gaming systems? What do you think is the right balance between consumer tech and crypto?
Well, I would argue that it actually is not about technology. We're big believers in it's about the experience, not the technology. So I'll use a different technology. Nobody really cares if you're delivering something via Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. They don't care. They want the thing that they're trying to get. They want the experience. And that's kind of how I feel about all this. Is ultimately, I would like to see it all working. It's doing all its magic underneath, but I don't need to know about it. And one of the things, I'll just say anecdotally, when I was first playing in this stuff, the user experience is terrible in most of these cases, right?
Preach, preach, preach.
Which then, as a consumer, I just turn away. I don't have time. You want me to do this and then connect it to this and connect, right? So I do believe that it's about moving. Yes, you need the right technology to deliver an experience, but you have to prioritize what your consumer is looking for in the first place and how much attention they're willing to give to get to the thing that they want.
Yeah, I just want to, I know it's not my turn, apologies,
No,
but this is such a huge thing in my mind, and this is going to stand between Web3 as it is today to Web3 being, the technology, the way that we interact online in the future for everyone, and it is that user experience. We cannot expect everyone to basically change the way that they interact with technology. The technology has to change to essentially provide a very similar and familiar experience that the majority of people expect. And I think it's something that doesn't get enough attention, and I think is like the next massive thing that needs to be tackled.
I mean, Dina, you mentioned the experience you guys did at Miami Art Week. In your description, you mentioned Art Block's engine and generative art, which 97 people know what that means. So, but
They're all in the room.
and thank you for your attention. But I'm just wondering. I mean, when you want that to be something that is going to the millions or hundreds of millions of fans or customers or clients that Shiseido touches, how much do you care whether they know this is a generative art piece or I think Jen Stark does great work, right? And I want to collect something of hers.
Yeah. I don't know if this is a direct answer, but I will say that we very strategically used highly accessible language in talking about that project to our consumers. And one of the things that I always try to ensure for projects that I'm shepherding on behalf of our brands is that there is an element of the project that will allow us a degree of credibility in this highly sensitive and sometimes critical space. So that's where, for example, partners like Art Block's Engine or the incredible artists that we brought on board to work on that project are key. But we also want to make sure that consumers who, let's not even say that they don't know about Web3, they don't care about Web3 because they do not understand how it serves them or how it improves their experience. And so for those consumers, which are the vast majority of beauty consumers that we serve, we talk about it in very easy to understand terms. So it isn't about an NFT, definitely not. It's not about generative art. It's about a digital collectible or a piece of digital artwork that you can have in your collection. And then also connecting that back, obviously, to sort of the phygital rewards.
Did you say phygital rewards?
I'm sorry. I know. It's the worst word.
I heard her say it.
IYK was just here. They didn't say phygital. You could not say phygital. All right, my final question. We have just 2 minutes left. I want each of your prediction, which is, again, we have amazing builders, founders in this room. Do we think that a breakout new internet company or project comes from brands building on emerging tech rails and therefore bringing this new audience in? Or do you think it is from someone in this room who's native to Web3 and the new internet breaking through to the masses through those layers that are quite resistant to it, as Dina was just saying? So in 30 seconds, is it the brands coming in or is it the culture and community coming out?
I probably shouldn't say this. I kind of want it to be the culture and community, right? This is like people first. I think brands are going to continue to look in this space. They want it. We all want to succeed here. But there is an opportunity for that person that you're not paying attention to. I mean, I think about like South by Southwest 3-4 years ago. It was all about big data, and that's all we talked about, right? I haven't heard anybody talk about it right now, right? Now it's AI, and it's yeah. So I have to say I'm curious to see if there's someone on the sides that's going to find that angle in, or someone's, I should say. So
Dina?
I think it's a little bit of a chicken and egg scenario. I think I think both brands and also builders in Web3 bear a degree of responsibility. But at the same time, I would challenge any of the developers and the builders in the room to build products that are so good, consumers want to participate in them, because when there is scale and credibility, the brands will come and it's much easier to justify the investment.
Jamie?
Yeah, I'm gonna split the egg as well and say both. I think it would be utterly naive of us to say that there's not going to be a shocker that comes out of left field. What that will be, if I could guess, I would not be here today. I'd be sitting on my private island. But I also do feel, like, to what you were saying, that the brands do bring legitimacy to the space. So I think it's going to be both. And I think it'll be great because it'll have, basically converge different audiences and hopefully lead to mass adoption of a great technology.
All right. Thank you, ladies. Thank you, Boys Club.
Thanks,
Thank you all.
everyone.